It's now time for us to take a closer look at verbs in Greek. If you will please turn to section 3 in your grammar and look at page 3, where we see an overview of the verbal system in Greek. Now, everything that I'm going to be talking to you about today is found on pages 3-3, 3-4, 3-5, 3-6, 3-7, and 3-8. Perhaps no other word in Greek shows us the sophistication of the language as does the Greek verb. Verbs in Greek have the ability to show us many different kinds of information. For example, a verb can show us the kind of action which is taking place. There are 3 kinds of action that a verb can convey. It can show us that action is ongoing, continuation, it's progressing. Or a verb can show us that action has been completed, it's finished. Sometimes that completion has implied in it that there are ongoing results. And then a third kind of action is showing us that something simply takes place, that something happens, that's an event. When the action of a verb is said to be continuing, we say that the aspect of that verb is continuation. Aspect has to do with the view of the one speaking or writing in regards to the kind of action that's taking place. So a continuation aspect tells us that action is ongoing, continuing, progressing. An aspect of a verb that is completed is seeing the verb in such a way or seeing the action in such a way that it is considered to be finished, completed. An aspect of a verb that names an event or simply says something happens or has happened is called indefiniteness. So there are 3 kinds of aspects or kinds of action. Let's equate those 2 things. The word aspect is equated with kind of action. So there are 3 kinds of action that a verb can convey: continuation, completion, and indefiniteness. Besides the aspect or the kind of action that a verb can convey, there is what we call voice. The voice of a verb has to do with the relationship of the subject to the predicate, to the action part of a sentence. For example, if the subject is acting upon an object, or if the subject is something, we call that the active voice. When the subject is acted upon, or when the subject receives the action, we call that the passive voice. Now, we have those 2 voices also in English, the active and the passive voice. But Greek has a 3rd voice called the middle voice, which we do not have in English. Sometimes the Greek middle voice can convey a reflexive kind of action, where the subject acts upon itself. A 3rd kind of information that a verb can give us is called mood. Now, the mood is just the relationship of the verb to reality. Sounds a little mysterious, doesn't it? But by that I mean a verb can state a fact. It can state a fact whether it's true or not, as though something exists. A verb can make a declaration or an assertion. For example, Jesus loves us, making a statement of fact. And so the relationship to reality there is one of stating a fact that something exists. Jesus loves us. A verb can also issue a command. Go into all the world and make disciples. Or an exhortation. Let us love one another. Or a plea. Lord, have mercy. Please have mercy. Besides making a command or an exhortation or an entreaty, or besides making a statement of fact, a verb can also issue certain kinds of questions like, what shall we do? In Matthew 6, verse 31, Jesus says, therefore do not be anxious, saying, what do we eat? What are we going to drink? What are we going to wear? Those are questions of great doubt or concern or deliberation. Or suppose we want to indicate something like purpose, where we want to say, God sent His only begotten Son into the world for what purpose? Well, so that we might live. And when we're talking about purpose, we're talking about potentiality. A verb can also indicate possibility, that maybe something will happen, that something might happen, and we're not quite sure of the outcome.